Welcome back. My name's James Johnson, and I'm very glad you're here. We're going to talk in this episode about what I think will be the literal final battle, and I'll get more in detail in a split second. But we've read the first 5 books. We've seen the first 6 seasons, and we're going to be talking about spoilers and predictions. Again, glad you're here. Mama, this is my mama, LaDonna. Mama?
Hello, folks. How are you doing today? And glad to have you with us. And we're all so excited to hear about new casting news and a bunch of things. And we just want to kind of stay in the mix for a little bit because we're chomping at the bit to start the new season again.
No kidding. And apparently it's going to be a little bit longer than we anticipated. All right. So I've got some notes I'm just going to read, and when we're done, my mom and I can talk about them.
Do you mind terribly if I give another plug? I did it on the other video. For those people who have not watched it, Trial by Trivia is doing a wonderful fundraising project, and I've been one of the people to compete, as has James, and they're supporting, I believe it's called the Guardian Angel dogs that help people with disabilities, and they're asking for contributions. If you all watch those and you're willing, we'd love you all to give $5, $10, $20 or whatever you can. Even a small amount would really help this organization. So consider it, please, and thank you, Tarzan, and all the rest of your group for inviting James and myself to compete.
I had an absolute blast. My mom is still having an absolute blast. So let's begin. I'm just going to go straight into the nitty-gritty. Here's what, at the end of this, Jon will face the Night's King in a one-on-one. The old way. A jousting upon steeds, but not horses, dragons. And the Night's King having a whited dragon. You're right, Jon says. You're right. There's no need for a battle. Thousands of men don't need to die. Only one of us. Let's end this the old way, you against me. He says that to Ramsay. Ramsay says, I keep hearing stories about you, bastard. The way people in the North talk about you, you're the greatest swordsman who ever walked. Maybe you are that good. Maybe not. The stories about Jon in the future will be fantastical. Best swordsman who fought alongside giants and wildlings, who spoke to God, Bran, and who lived twice, nay, thrice, the life of a regular man. Will your men want to fight for you when they hear you wouldn't fight for them? Jon says to Ramsay. He's good. He's very good. When Jon wins the fight against the Night's King, and he will, though not without help, through Bran, Jon will be remembered as the King of Kings, the best of them all, and he will be the last. See the link to Tyrion's democracy in the description. At the end, most of the world will have died. Think about that, most of the world will have died. We have already seen so much war. We already know there's almost no food left. At the end, most of the world will have died when the final battle is about to happen. And the few that remain will have few left that they knew. And no food and no hope. And the Night's King can offer them peace. Internally, worldly, and eternal. Ramsay says, they're loyal beasts, talking about his dogs. Sansa says they were. Now they're starving. At the end, there will be no more food, and everyone will have trekked thousands of miles from Harrenhal to Winterfell and lost many last loved ones in a minor victory at Winterfell before the Great War, a battle they know they will lose. Does Jon fight the Night's King to save the world? Or does Jon do it to save the world from themselves? And what I mean by that, if you were told, as a leader, as a ruler, that all your people could choose peace, do you have a right to say no for them? Really, think about it. Yeah, we're all on Jon's side in his final battle. Though we empathize with the enemy, we're all on his side. But doesn't each individual get to decide which side they want to fight for? To choose between free will along with the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or no free will, but eternal peace. without suffering, and with true empathy for all the others who have chosen the same. Jon's reason will be irrelevant to the world. When his side wins, Jon will be the hero that stood against the darkest foe the world has ever faced, and did so for family, for duty, for honor, to save a kingdom from a dark fate. But really, he made the choice for the world, and he won, and the winners write the history books. How will it end, George R. R. Martin? Bittersweet. Also, Jon has learned that he must not lose track of his, this is separate a little bit, but he's going to fight the Night's King in a final battle, choosing for the entire world free will. If he loses, he tells the Knight, if I lose, you take them, give them eternal peace. If I win, you're dead. But Jon can't actually kill him because he's immortal. He's a warg, basically, in my opinion. And Bran has to be the one that stabs him in the back at the end, keeps the Night's King from having a second life, which is exactly what Hallan Reed did for Ned at the Tower of Joy, without the second life involved. But the idea that Ned would have lost the battle had it not been for Hallan Reed. Also, Jon has learned that he must not lose track of his, this is a side note to that main point, Jon has learned that he must not lose track of his goal, his strategy, his plan. He learned that at the Battle of the Bastards. He can't let taunts or threats misdirect him, even if that means the threatened death of a loved one, like Rickon. Martin loves to put us in positions where people make choices we understand and agree with, and then they and the world suffer as a result. Ned, Robb, Catelyn. And Martin does this so that later, when characters we love choose the opposite of what we previously would have thought was the right choice, the thing we would normally not be okay with, they choose now. But because we've seen the consequences of the right choice, we will understand the reasoning they make behind the other choice. As Jon refuses to fall victim to his enemies' jeers, not lose sight of the forest for the trees, not save someone he loves. And we will nod in hesitant approval. And I don't know who that's going to be or how that's going to happen. But Jon's going to be not taunted in the rude way, but there are consequences to his actions. And he will stay steadfast towards the goal. And he will meet with the Night's King, learn that he's offering eternity and peace. And Jon has to say, do I go back and tell everybody and let the ones who want to join? Do I trudge forward and never tell anybody? No. We do this the old way. Me against you. And if I lose, you let them join you. I think that's beautiful. And if it happens, it'd be fantastic, and I don't know. But I think it's beautiful. Mommy, you want to respond to all that?
I do. I like that. I wanted to add a couple of things. You know, you talked about some of the lines that are said in the show, and we've said that we're going to hear a lot of these lines again in a very similar context. We already have, but it's going to be coming to full fruition soon. And you know, you talked about Jon saying we could end it right here, mano to mano. I mean, man to man, the old way. Jaime said that to Robb, and Robb said, "I'd lose if I did that, and I'm not going to do it your way." And Jaime has also done it beforehand when he stabbed Aerys to stop him with a wildfire that would have destroyed a lot of people. So this repetitive lines, we're going to hear it again. Another thing is, you know, if it comes down to a final battle, and it will, with the Night's King and Jon, food is a definite issue. And we've talked about perhaps Littlefinger storing a lot of food at Harrenhal and kind of becoming king of the world, because Bronn said that if you have all the food in a siege, you become the richest person in the world. Well, leave that concept alone. I think that's what's going to happen with Littlefinger at Harrenhal. But ultimately, there's still not enough food. They're not going to let everybody in Harrenhal. But if you become a white, you don't need any food. You don't have to you don't have any needs. You're basically dead, but still animated. In addition to that, or resulting in that, if people have to make the decision to fight and get injured and have pain and continue to go on and on, like John really doesn't want to come back again, but Mel says, too bad, I'm going to resurrect you every time I can. If John says you need to fight and these people say, what are we fighting for? There's no food. We just went through a long night. It'll take years for us to get our harvest back. What are we fighting for? I think a lot of adults would lie down and die. They just say, take me. I don't want to be stabbed and mutilated before I die. Just kill me and take me out. But what's going to happen, and this again is repeating lines. How many times have we had people say, and Varys said it first to Ned, what of your children? Because Ned's in the dungeon said, what are you saving me for? He said, what? For another few days of life? Remember, Ned said that in the dungeon, and Varys says, what of your children, Lord Eddard? And that's when Ned made a decision to go against his honor to save his children. I think we've also seen it where Carsey ultimately makes that decision. She's the wildling leader at Harrenhal, and she basically says, we're going to do it for the kids. And remember, she stops fighting when the children who have become whites come up to her. It's like, man, I give up. I can't do this to the children. We saw Catelyn do it. She turned against King Robb, her own son, to go and send Jaime to get her children for her. We see it over and over again. These are the choices that mankind will have to make in the end, and the adults will continue to fight for their children. They may die, but they're hoping the world will be saved so their children can go on, because they don't want their kids to live like that. Another thing, you mentioned Brand.
Let me add to what you're saying, then we'll wrap it around if I can, if you don't mind, just because I got something directly to say with what you're saying.
Go ahead, honey. I've got it set up differently.
If the people were given the choice and there's no food, there, exactly what my mom described, the snow is 20, 30 feet deep. There's no food. They've just trekked all the way, and they see this army in front of them. There's no way they could win against this army. They've got everyone with them. You're talking about the injured, the old, deathbed, children.
The broken men.
And the broken men, literally. And they've lost almost everybody they've ever known. Most of those people will not know each other because they've lost so many people that most of the people they know are dead, almost guaranteed. But if you had a child in that situation and someone told you, I can give that child peace, what? Well, my sweet summer child, what do you know of fear? Fear is for the winter when the snows fall 100 feet deep. Fear is for the long night when the sun hides for years. Where children are born and die, all in darkness. Women smothered their babies rather than see them starve.
That's right. And
wept and felt the tears freeze on their cheeks. If they're willing to kill them to save them, what else are they willing to do? Give them up? Eternal peace? Would you be wrong not to choose that? Go ahead. That's what I wanted to add.
That's a perfect segue into that. That is a metaphor for what might happen at the end. That instead of letting the kids starve, they just give them over to the Night's King and say, okay, at least they won't suffer. Take them. And it's a perfect metaphor for what could end. But this goes back to Pandora's box. Do we have eternal hope? Do we think there's a sliver of hope that we might be able to turn the tide in the end? And as Ned said, the only time you can be brave is when you are afraid. And another image that sprung to mind about losing everybody and being decimated at the end of this, and are you willing to continue to fight? You remember the older woman that was standing next to Arya at Harrenhal while they were torturing her son? and she's just standing there with this 1,000-yard stare. Her son is just screaming in the background. And I think either Arya or Gendry asked her a question, and she said, "That's my son." She said, "My husband died 3 days ago," and she goes on about her family. That's what they're going to look like at the end. Starving, dehydrated, all their relatives are gone. How much hope do you have? How much internal strength do you have to continue to go on? And I will tell you, as a parent who has lost a lot of people in my life, a lot of times the only thing that's kept me going on are my children. So there's a lot to be said for that. And I think that's what's going to happen at the end.
And consider all the harm and famine and rape and murder and theft that's occurred in Winterfell merely because of the war that's already been. There's no food left. Olenna has all the food. Arguably Dorne has some because they don't get involved with shit. But there's about to be another battle that's probably going to be bigger than all the battles we've already had, and that is the battle for Westeros. That Dany's coming over and we're supporting. Even if Dany wins, what food's going to be left? What people? What is left of the kingdom? And then as soon as this battle's over, ships destroyed, people's lives destroyed, cities burned, and now it starts snowing, and there's nowhere to go. Harrenhal's the only choice, and not only is Harrenhal the only choice because there's food there. Littlefinger's been hoarding it up in the books. It's mentioned sparsely, but it's in there. He's also got Harrenhal by contract and by Cersei's direction. And at one point, Tyrion told him he'd give it to him, but he never did.
I think Tyrion gave it to him.
I don't recall. Think about it. But not only is that the only place they can go for food, government's kind of kaput depending on what happens with Dany, and it's also the only place they're going to think they're safe there. It's impenetrable from the ground.
1 million marchers could not penetrate it, they said. 1 million. That is the millions of the Night's King.
But what took Harrenhal down?
The dragons.
The dragons. So I think two things are ultimately going to be the motivations for them leaving. Number one, that there are going to be, at least Jon speaking through Bran, knowledge that, or maybe Sam's research, that the Night's King cannot take Winterfell. If the Night's King takes Winterfell, it's done. So they have to go fight. But also that they're doomed anyway if the Night's King gets a dragon, and he's going to get one. I think he'll white it too. And that'll be the Ice Dragon, because they control ice, and it'll be a whited dragon. But they're going to think they're safe, and Jon and Sansa and all those people are going to have to convince them, you can't wait here. You have to go fight. And imagine, yeah, they're loyal beasts. They were. Now they're starving. You convinced them to come with you, and now they've trekked 1,000 miles, no food, no water, everybody's dead, and they see the army.
It'll be interesting, James, if he has an ice dragon. I think we're absolutely heading that way, no question about it. And I think, if I'm right, Martin was the first one to ever write a fantasy novel about an ice dragon, which is a short story, almost childlike. If you want to get it, I don't think it's being published right now, but you can still get it periodically. I've got one. I think we're definitely getting an ice dragon. It'll be interesting to see if they breathe something that freezes people versus fire. I think that will be interesting. I did want to clarify one thing you said about Bran assisting Jon, and we've talked about this in other videos. You said stab him in the back. You mean that metaphorically, if I can correct it, because Jon will be the boots on the ground. He's got to do the physical battle, maybe in the air with the dragons.
We'll be in the air.
Bran has to contain the Night's King's mind so he can't project it somewhere else. So Bran's going to have a metaphysical mind battle while Jon is taking him down physically. And that, I think it was referenced in Bran's first chapter about the winged bound wolf, wasn't it? It didn't.
That's the crow, I believe. It's not his first chapter. It's the visions he has, I believe, while he's.
I think I'm right, but I could be wrong. But he has some vision of a winged bound wolf. And, you know, the original Night's King, according to Old Nan, who she said everybody thinks he was a so-and-so, a so-and-so. She said, but everybody knows he's really a Stark. So that mythology is there. So it's going to be fascinating. It's going to be fascinating. But Harrenhal, all roads lead to Harrenhal.
About the wolf.
Ultimately, I mean, it's not called Winterfell for nothing. We've got King's Landing, and again, I think it's a joke because I don't think Tommen ends that way, but that king certainly did jump and land. Winterfell, though, in all seriousness, it's named that for a reason. Winter fell there, and the Starks are the kings of winter. And the last thing I want to add is it's not just going to be Jon and Bran. Don't you forget that fellow in the past of the Targaryens rode with two sisters. Don't you forget, two sisters on the other dragons. And I swear, even now, I think it's going to be ultimately Arya and Sansa, which would be a real rush. I'll tell you what'll be a real rush. When that damaged dragon falls to the ground and dies up north, and you see the Night's King do this and raise an ice dragon. How cool is that going to be?
Yeah. No kidding. As a side note to what you mentioned, they refer to Jon as the White Wolf in the most recent episode when they declare him king in the North. Apparently Martin had already written in the books that when a bastard ends up taking over a house, you invert the colors. So the white background with a gray wolf, you invert it and makes it a white wolf on a gray background, which is just perfectly epitomizes Jon, the brooding gray figure, but white wolf. He's got the white wolf. I don't know this for sure. I don't know any of this shit for sure. But a wolf with wings, a winged wolf, would make a perfect sigil for him because he's Stark and Targaryen. And a white winged wolf, maybe chains broken, because that's kind of what the mythology or the vision Bran has, is the chained winged wolf. But if it's a winged wolf, then it would have, because the dragons in this have 4 limbs. They have 2 legs, 2 wings, and that's unless you're an insect, that's how it works. Birds, bats, there's no hands in addition to wings.
I'll disagree with you there, because in mythology, and I looked this up one day.
Mythology's different.
In some mythologies, dragons actually have 4 legs and 2 wings, but in this show, it's not. The wings are the hands.
What I meant to say was that it makes sense. If you're gonna go with mythology, but have it set in a real world and make a kind of physical sense, unless it's an insect, it makes sense for it to have 4 limbs, ultimately, maybe a tail.
Of course, and also there's a reference to him becoming the White Wolf, because Gandalf was Gandalf the Grey, and when he was resurrected, he became Gandalf the White. So that I think that was a clear nod to Tolkien by Martin. I think it was intentional.
I wanted to say, I just got this written down so I get it out. You mentioned the only time you can't, when you're afraid, is the only time you can be brave. Well, the only time it matters to have hope is when there is none. It always matters to have hope, but the most important time is when there is none.
Well, the darkest hour is right before the dawn, and we've got dawn in here too, you know.
And Lightbringer.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
It's not called dawn for nothing. Come on.
And the promised one will be born beneath a fallen star. Just recently, there was an Egyptian dagger, I believe it was Egyptian, that tests confirmed that it was made out of a meteorite. So it's not unheard of for that to happen. And Dawn, the sword, is leaning against the bed in the television show, and we don't know for sure in the books, but we presume there's something like that. So Jon and Dany were born beneath a falling star. I know y'all think I'm fucking crazy for that, but y'all just wait. Jon and Dany are twins. We'll see.
Y'all can argue with us. It doesn't matter. And
maybe we're wrong. If we're wrong, fuck it. We'll move on.
It makes complete sense for them to be 2 sides of the coin. That's why they brought the flip of the Targaryens. You know, one is madness and one is not. And you know, Cersei's twins. We've got the twins at the Frey house. I mean,
Targaryens have married twins. The Targaryens married twins for centuries, and no one said anything.
except John and Danny. Danny's gonna die, in my opinion. But
yep, she's gonna join the Night's King and then die.
We'll see. We'll see.
Right.
Okay.
Love you,
Thank
Mom.
you. Love you
Thank
too.
y'all for being here.
Bye.